Screen Rant still thinks Kathleen Kennedy is a good choice to lead Lucasfilm. Andy No speaks out in regards to Mumford & Sons Twitter debacle. And 100,000 immigrants are at the U.S.-Mexico border. And I have a lot to say about that. In our lead story today, Screen Rant says that Kathleen Kennedy is still the best fit to lead the Star Wars franchise as well as Lucasfilm. It was reported earlier this week that Disney had a shareholders meeting and the CEO of Disney, Bob Chapek, stated that Kathleen Kennedy was going to head the helm of Lucasfilm and the Star Wars franchise for years to come. This came as a big disappointment for many Star Wars fans, including myself, because we were hoping this was the year that Kathleen Kennedy was going to step aside, or at least that was what the rumors were for many, many years, that in 2021, Kathleen Kennedy would no longer be the head of Lucasfilm, and maybe she'll go off and retire or start her own company or lead her own company. But unfortunately, those rumors were squashed earlier this week by Bob Chapek. Now, I want to be very clear in my opinion of Kathleen Kennedy. I think she is actually really good at her job. I just don't think she has the right vision for the Star Wars universe. She's clearly done really great things in the past, such as E.T., Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, and other franchises and movie titles. But again, her vision and her direction of where Star Wars should be going is just not the right fit. Whereas Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau have a really clear idea of how Star Wars should be done, and that is why they're meeting the expectations of Star Wars fans, whereas Kathleen Kennedy has clearly not met any of our expectations, maybe in some regards, but in the vast majority of Star Wars fans, she has only hurt the franchise rather than helping it. Furthermore, the reason why I'm saying she doesn't have the right vision is because Star Wars is so much deeper in its understanding of how the Force works, the philosophy of Star Wars, light and darkness, how it works between order and chaos. It's a very deep concept, and it's a deeper concept than a lot of other franchises out there have even come remotely to reaching. And I think that you could tell that she doesn't have the basic understanding of how the Force works, especially compared to how George Lucas clearly has taught about the Force or talked about the Force, and as well as Dave Filoni has talked about the Force. And if you watch Dave Filoni and George Lucas talk, it almost sounds identical in their understanding of how deep the concept of Star Wars is and the universe and how it works. But you never have heard Kathleen Kennedy talk about Star Wars in the same way Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, as well as George Lucas has. And even more than that is Jon Favreau doesn't still know how deep the Star Wars universe goes compared to Dave Filoni and George Lucas, which is why Jon Favreau basically does not make any decisions without going first through Dave Filoni. Whereas Kathleen Kennedy is more of, hey, it's my way or the highway. I'm going to make the decisions that I think is best. But that's the problem. It's just her thinking. Her thinking is not predicated on the understanding of the Star Wars universe. Whereas there's other people that are creating great projects, hence Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, that have that deep understanding and that rich culture of that universe and are now pushing content and being creative with that content that we want as the Star Wars fandom. I think that she can still lead Lucasfilm. There's a lot of other titles and projects that Lucasfilm is a part of, and I think that she does have a lot of great things to offer. But in regards to the Star Wars universe, they need to put up Dave Filoni as the head, very similar to what Kevin Feige's doing at Marvel. And that way Star Wars can be what all the fans expect it to be and have somebody that has the same vision as them helming the Star Wars universe. That way they can meet our expectations in regards to content. As mentioned previously, this article is coming from ScreenRant.com, and it is titled Why Kathleen Kennedy is Still the Best Choice to Lead Star Wars' Future, and it's written by Rick Stevenson. Rick starts off by saying Disney has confirmed that Kathleen Kennedy isn't going anywhere as the president of Lucasfilm, and that's good news for the future of Star Wars. So we kind of have an idea of what Rick's opinion is of Kathleen Kennedy. He clearly thinks that she's a positive good for the franchise, whereas myself and many other Star Wars fans think that she's a drastic negative for the franchise. Kennedy took on the role after Lucasfilm was acquired by Disney, being personally selected by George Lucas himself. I really wonder if he's kicking himself or he thinks it was actually still to this day a good decision. And maybe he does in regards to Lucasfilm as a whole. Maybe it was a good decision, but not necessarily a good decision to have her involved within the Star Wars franchise. and she's overseen the franchise resurgence over the past several years. Kennedy has often been a polarizing figure to the fan base, however, with some contingents blaming her for what they see as a downward turn for Star Wars. Stevenson goes on later in the article to state the rumors that Kennedy would soon be ousted also put forward Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, the respective creators of The Mandalorian and Star Wars The Clone Wars, as possible replacements as Lucasfilm president. Both Favreau and Filoni have made undeniably important contributions to the franchise, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are prime candidates for Kennedy's role. Where Favreau and Filoni are storytellers and skill that's been put to excellent use as showrunners on their various Star Wars shows, Kennedy is a producer by trade, and her impressive track record in that role stretches back far before her time at Lucasfilm, including work on major blockbusters like E.T., Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, and The Sixth Sense. And this is exactly the point that I was making before, is that Kathleen Kennedy might be good at producing other franchises and blockbusters, but she is not a good fit for all franchises, such as Star Wars. Star Wars is a massive franchise, and you need to know the story and the understanding of how Star Wars functions and works, and you might not need that deep understanding of other blockbusters and franchises such as Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, because they are, yes, storytelling movies and also action-packed, but there's not an entire universe that's necessarily built around them, whereas Star Wars does have that rich culture, that philosophy, that religion, and the understanding of how the Force works, different cultures even inside the universe. So you can't even equate the two, and that's exactly the mistake that Stevenson is making within this article, is he's trying to compare the Star Wars universe with other movie titles that aren't even in the same realm as the Star Wars universe. And again, Kathleen Kennedy might be good as being a producer, and quite frankly, she is good at being a producer, but not just producing Star Wars titles. And I think her track record in regards to the Star Wars universe is not a good one. I think, again, it's a negative, but her track record is clearly good for other blockbusters just from what we've seen in the past. Again, like Star Wars, E.T., The Sixth Sense, Indiana Jones. Those are great movies, and those are also great storytelling movies, but it is nothing comparable to the storytelling of Star Wars, which is why you need people that are storytellers like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau that have the understanding of Star Wars so that they can tell those stories. That's why there's hundreds of novels. I shouldn't say 100, but there's a lot of novels. There actually might be 100 or so novels at this point, if you include graphic novels, of Star Wars that is rich in content, rich in storytelling. You cannot have somebody like Kathleen Kennedy that has a very surface level understanding of the Star Wars universe and be expected to create content that is going to meet the Star Wars or the base Star Wars fandom. There's just no way. And you have to understand that at Lucasfilm as well as Disney, that she's just not able to meet the expectations of the Star Wars fans, and that's why you need to have her step aside. I'm not saying remove her totally from Lucasfilm, just have her go work on other projects. And I think it is a mistake of Stevenson to try and equate the Star Wars universe with all these other blockbusters. Stevenson goes on to write, there's a visible vocal group within the Star Wars fandom that has consistently complained of forced feminist and progressive messaging in the modern films, and it should come as no surprise that those same disgruntled viewers have decided repeatedly to blame the woman in charge. Well, yes, if you're the one that's in charge, you're the one that's going to get the blame because you're the one that's in charge. And it's a little weird that he throws that she's a woman in charge. I mean, we all know why he did it, right? Just based on what he's written already so far. But it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. You're still the one in charge. And all the creative decisions, yes, are through other people, but you're the one that signs off on that at the end of the day. We don't mind characters coming into the Star Wars universe that carry feminist traits or characteristics as well as progressive ideologies. We just want them to be introduced through the course of storytelling, and this is something Dave Filoni understands by creating Cara Dune, Ahsoka Tano, but it's not something that Kathleen Kennedy understands, where she's just pushing this content without any context, and she's just expecting us just to accept it by shoving it down our throats. Lastly, it goes on to say, a different point of view might see Kennedy as someone who has helped broaden the appeal of Star Wars to a more diverse viewership while also putting other talented creatives in place to produce great content. Disney's Star Wars tenure has hit bumps in the roads for sure, but the future of the franchise looks as bright as ever, with multiple upcoming Star Wars shows and movies that are worth being excited about, and Kathleen Kennedy is still a big part of that. Again, if you want to have a diversified viewership and have people accept the content that you're pushing, it has to have storytelling behind it and it has to make sense within the Star Wars universe. You just can't keep cramming the stuff down our throats without any context behind it and expecting us to understand it. And my last little tidbit on this story is that, again, I think Kathleen Kennedy is a good fit for other franchises. I just don't think she is the right nor a good fit for the Star Wars universe, where Dave Filoni is clearly the right man for the job. And our next news story of the day is regarding Andy Ngo speaking out for Mumford & Sons lead guitarist in regards to his Twitter debacle that happened earlier this week. To give a little backstory on what was going on, the lead guitarist of Mumford & Sons, Winston Marshall, read one of Andy Ngo's books, Unmasked, and he posted about it on Twitter, and the leftist mob went absolutely nuts, and now he's apologizing and taking time away from the band because of what he posted. This article comes from our friends over at Blaze Media. It is written by Sarah Taylor, and she titles it, Andy Ngo Speaks Out on Mumford & Sons Musicians Break. If you challenge the reigning orthodoxy, you'll be made to suffer. She starts off by saying, Marshall announced this week that he was going on hiatus after critics blasted him for supporting Ngo's new book, Unmasked. Of the book, Ngo had said its intention is to take its reader inside Antifa's radical plan to destroy democracy. That doesn't seem like a bad thing to post about and try to get people more to read about, to see that Antifa are the ones that are destroying America from the inside out. She goes on to say, during his appearance, Ngo said, I know this is being covered a lot as the latest example of cancel culture, but I don't think that term fully encapsulates what's going on. We're dealing with a phenomenon of people who have powerful ties who are working to systematically close minds and to silence voices, and they are doing this entirely without throwing a punch, without any legislative change. That's what makes it quite shocking and subtle and insidious, he insisted. I write in my book about how much of what Antifa does is entirely nonviolent, but it doesn't make it not dangerous. I do agree with Andy here in regards that there's a phenomenon, a culture that is systematic, and I'm being very careful when I say that word because I don't believe in institutional racism. I don't think cancel culture is interwoven throughout our system of the United States, through our government, through our private sector, public sector, through our laws. I don't believe that. But what I do believe is that there is a system in place that is through groups of people working together in a systematic way to go out there and cancel people based on what they find offensive. I personally think it was idiotic for him to apologize as well as take time away from his band just because he posted about a book that he thought was interesting to everybody else who might find it interesting as well. There might be people that don't find it interesting, but there's nothing wrong with posting about a book on your social media. Moreover, you're going to read books throughout your entire life that you're curious about that other people are going to find offensive. Heck, you might read a book that you find offensive and not agree with and still post it on the internet for other people to learn from. I'll give you a prime example. Hitler's Mein Kampf. You might find it curious and want to read about it, of what was going on through that psycho's head while he was writing this and creating this type of ideology and movement, but that doesn't mean you agree with it, and you might post it out there for other people to read about and learn from so they don't have the same psycho thoughts as this guy. And you should have never apologized for posting this on your social media. It's your social media. If they don't like it, they don't have to check out your social media. If they don't like the book, then they don't have to read the book. It's as simple as that. But by you apologizing, all you're doing is giving in to their actions, making them think that this type of behavior is okay, when in reality it's not. In reality, it is evil. And it's exactly what we should be going against by standing up and saying, look, I'm not going to apologize. I think this book is good, or I think whatever I said is good. I'm going to stand by it. And that's that. And they have to go off and now attack somebody else. And if everybody keeps doing that, standing up to them, they have nobody to attack, and they can finally get out of their mother's basement and get a job and finally being a asset to society rather than a disease. But this is the culture that the left and the Democrats want, because if they didn't, they'd be sitting here talking about it just as we are, saying that it's evil, it's wrong. Nobody should have the authority to cancel your free speech just because they disagree with you or that they found you offensive. They should be standing up right alongside with us, complaining about it. Us conservatives, we need to continue post news stories like this and fight against this cancel culture so one day we could be victorious and it's defeated, it's gone, and we never have to see it again. And our last news story of the day is dealing with Biden's disastrous immigration policy. This comes from our friends over at the Daily Wire. If you're not a subscriber, please make sure you become a member today. It is written by Hank Barron, and he titles it, Over 100,000 Immigrants at Border in February, Highest Since 2019. I want to highlight this article because it really does show through numbers and statistics how ineffective Biden's immigration policy has been, as well as how asinine it is for him to push this type of immigration policy and have this type of crisis at our US-Mexico border when for the most part it was under control through the Trump administration. But Hank here says, on Wednesday, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, also known as the CBP, released operational statistics for February 2021 showing that CBP encountered 100,000 people trying to enter the United States at the southwest border, a figure representing an almost 30% increase over January. So basically, it's just getting worse as the year goes on, and Biden has no plan to figure it out or fix it because he doesn't have a clue what's going on in his own head. It goes on to say Customs and Border Protection said that 25,000 of the migrants they encountered in February had already attempted to cross the border previously. Beginning in April 2020, CBP had seen an increase in encounters of unaccompanied children from Central America at the southwest border. In fiscal year 2021 through February, 30,000 unaccompanied children and single minors had been encountered along the southwest border. 2,942 of these children are under the age of 12 years old, and almost 27,000 are aged 13 to 17 years old. And again, the Biden administration doesn't look at this as a crisis. They only look at it as a challenge. And I keep repeating this. I keep saying that they only classify this as a challenge rather than a crisis because it just shows how unimportant they think immigration is. Because if they thought it was important, they would lock up the border, they would stop people from coming in illegally and create a better, more efficient system to allow people to file their paperwork, kind of like Trump was doing with asylum in their own country, so that they can come here legally and do the process that way, rather than trying to cross the border and then file the paperwork, then being sent back in, and then just trying to come in the border again illegally, which is what we're seeing here, almost repeat offenders. Hank goes on to say, according in CBP, Texas Rio Grande Valley Station saw the biggest increase in apprehended immigrants. The number increased from 17,000 in January to roughly 28,000 in February. Tucson and Yuma stations increased from 12,372 apprehensions in January to 19,740 in February. Why? Because Biden cannot figure this out. He decided to cancel all of Trump's immigration policies that were working. We're not saying they were perfect, but they were at least working where they stopped the bleeding. But Democrats have an image, they have a persona to the rest of the world where when a Democrat's in office, they're going to be lax on immigration, which is why you're seeing this big influx of people coming into our country illegally. And now the U.S. Border Customs is completely overwhelmed and they don't even know what to do. The Biden administration doesn't know what to do because they don't even have enough housing for all the children that are coming in, let alone these single immigrants that are crossing the border illegally. Lastly, it states, I think we continue to struggle with the number of individuals in our custody, especially given the pandemic. And as far as the HHS, ORR, we continue to work with them to move children out of our custody as quickly as we can, and we need to move more quicker. I've tried to sit back and reflect why Biden would do this to himself. I mean, you got to admit, it is kind of weird that you would decide just to wipe out Trump's immigration policies in like your first week of office and now deal with it within your first 100 days. Why would you want to do this to yourself? Why not tackle it later on down the road? But it just doesn't make sense. And maybe it only makes sense to him because he's not all there in the head. And somehow, in some way, shape, or form, it makes sense for him. And I don't think anybody in the administration knows what's going on either, because you have Jacobson and Jen Psaki standing on the podium, not even making sense through their answers, and they're just fumbling through their words like Biden does. It's like contagious throughout the White House, but their answers aren't even making sense in regards to why they would create this immigration policy in the first place. It's illogical. Again, I can't wrap my head around why they would do this to themselves, but again, it's the Democrats running things. Why am I surprised that they're doing something that's illogical? Again, I highly recommend that you check out my older videos on Biden's immigration policy and watch me pick apart Jen Psaki's press conferences as well as the policies that Biden has put in place. I think you will thoroughly enjoy them. I'll put them in the cards as well as the description. And if you can't find them there, be sure to check them out through my other videos. Well, that is all the news I have for you today. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, share it with your friends and family, and I'll see you next time here on The Bald Brad Show.